Hello, everyone. Welcome you all to another episode of the Cosmic Matrix podcast. Today hosted just by myself, Bernhard Günther, and I have a very special guest on today. Good friend also here from Sedona, Daniel Harner from Austria, who also moved to the US about, 20 years ago?
Yes, in 2006.
2006, exactly 20 years ago.
Exactly 20, 20.
And we were connected through a mutual friend of ours, Mark Jones, evolutionary astrologer, who Laura studied with. And we first connected, 5-6 years ago when we first came here to Sedona. And you are also a psychospiritual teacher, researcher, and very interesting life. So I want to share a little bit to the audience first, a little bit of your bio, and then we dive a bit deeper into it all.
Yeah.
So you are a clinical psychologist and psychospiritual mentor, originally from Austria, now based here in Sedona, Arizona, and you moved to the US in your early 20s, really, to fully immerse yourself in psychotherapy, depth psychology, and transformational work, studying alongside leading therapists, all kinds of spiritual teachers and researchers in the fields of consciousness and healing. You hold multiple degrees in psychology, including a doctorate in clinical psychology, and spent decades exploring the intersection of psychotherapy, non-duality, Jungian analysis, and psychic or psychoenergetic science. And you have studied actually with David Hawkins directly, personally, for 6 years, researched consciousness and healing with physicist Dr. William A. Tiller, and you are also personally mentored by Jungian analyst Dr. Nathan Schwartz-Salen and many others. And at the core of your work is a deep commitment to, as you say, transformation and the realization of truth, beauty, and love. That's exactly, I feel, what, the ultimate intention is here on this journey. And you guide many people, or those who feel a genuine inner calling to return home to themselves and reconnect with the deeper ground of being. Welcome to the podcast, Daniel.
Hello, it's an honor and privilege to be here with you today.
Excellent, beautiful. So we're going to go with the flow, but I want to just give the audience a little overview of what we will explore a little bit here. So I want to dive deep into your journey from Austria to Sedona, what drew you here, into deeper psychospiritual work, your personal journey, realizations, insights. I want to examine the work of David Hawkins, right? The map of consciousness, how it actually works in practice, its potentials, its limitations, its misunderstandings and misuses as well. Even the whole idea of muscle testing we talk about, and non-dual teachings in general, how they easily can also be used as spiritual bypassing and all that. So we will also unpack David Hawkins' teachings on gradation of love, the nature of good and evil, especially nowadays, a very big topic, understanding what evil actually is, so to speak. The illusion of causality, that's a big topic. And where also the intellect gets kind of stuck in linear cause and effect thinking. And then we'll also move into more the tension between, like to explore what David Hawkins go about surrender, letting go and surrender, and also more shadow work, Jungian individuation, and self-realization. Then specifically your specific approach to psychospiritual work, because you really combine very different modalities into also an integral framework. We also address the Luciferic temptation, which Hawkins actually talked about, which I'm sure you have your experiences as well, with entities, spiritual interferences, the distortions of shadow work, especially nowadays in pop culture or social media therapists, so to speak, and what really the foundation is authentic psychospiritual transformation, the way you see it, and what it really means to be human in this time of transition, so to speak, in these intense times, and kind of zooming out as well into the bigger picture, the collective shadow, the polarization nowadays. Even maybe can talk a little bit about AI and what these turbulent times really are asking of the serious spiritual seeker or anybody engaged in sincere inner work. Before we dive into that, I have a little announcement. Laura and I are currently enrolling for our upcoming Embodied Soul Awakening program. It's a 14-week private online group experience in deep psychological and spiritual self-work starting March 18th and running through June 21st. This program weaves together somatic healing, shadow work, Jungian depth psychology, spiritual psychology, esoteric teachings, and much more into a holistic framework designed to help you embody your true self and step into your soul's purpose. We're living through a pivotal time in human history. The forces of change are accelerating, and the potential for genuine awakening has never been greater. But there's only so much self-work you can do on your own. This work is not meant to be done in isolation. There's something profoundly powerful about being in a committed container with like-minded seekers who share your depth and sincerity. It amplifies the work in ways that simply aren't possible alone. We limit enrollment to 40 people to ensure real depth and genuine community, and admission is by application only. Right now, we have only 7 spots remaining. For more information, including enrollment options and frequently answered questions and much more, go to thetimeoftransition.com. So, let's start with your journey. Tell us a little bit about how your journey started and what drew you to come to Sedona at this very young age. Early 2000s?
Yeah, I came to Sedona in 2006. And since I was a young child, I was always a very sensitive young person. And I always felt like something was missing in my life. I always felt like there was a sense of disconnect since I was a child, and the nature of human suffering was always something that deeply puzzled me. It was always very difficult to experience suffering and to see the suffering of other people, and that's what really motivated me to become a psychologist. Yeah. At a very early age, I felt a sense of disillusionment with the teachers around me, especially in school early on, when I saw my teachers not really representing what I thought to be the truth. And since I felt like there was nobody out there really able to tell me what to do, I had to go on my own journey. And I had to go deep within myself, studying psychology, philosophy, the Bhagavad Gita, psychedelics. And for me, that started all at a very early age of 17.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is very profound because, similar, I can relate to that as well. When people ask me, what set you on the path, it's a short answer, well, because I suffered.
Yeah.
All right. And so, but you also early on not interested in like, oh, let's just travel and party and whatnot. No, there were deeper questionings already arising.
Yeah.
And, what fascinates me, did you came across David Hawkins' work, obviously, when you were in Austria early on?
Yeah.
And was that the impulse that drew you then to Sedona?
That is correct. What came first was the book Memories, Dreams, and Reflections by Carl Jung. Mm-hmm. When I was 17 years old, I read that, and it completely blew my mind because he was the first person that really synthesized psychology and spirituality in a very unique way.
Yeah.
And I also was heavily influenced by Dr. Albert Hofmann, who was the discoverer of LSD.
Yeah.
And how he described the nature of reality and the psychedelic experience was something that I never heard be described before like that. When the veil of perception drops, out of a sudden a reality manifests itself that is non-dual and that is completely different than what we experience in our three-dimensional reality. Yeah. So these two Swiss men very early on put me on a very deep inner journey. And David Hawkins came during my first year in psychology at the University of Salzburg when I studied. And I came across his books there because the psychology as it was taught at university was very much from the outside in. Mm-hmm. And the nature of the soul was never addressed in the coursework. And Jung and Freud was only mentioned in the history of psychology class, really.
Yeah.
And cognitive psychology, personality testing, neuropsychology was something I was really heavily interested in as well. But the nature of the soul and what it really means to be, embodied in a very deep, individuated way, that was never something I was taught in school. So I was always hungry for more. Mm-hmm. So when I came across David Hawkins' work, it was another researcher that synthesized psychology and spirituality in a very unique way.
Yeah.
So after Jung, David Hawkins was really the pioneer in my experience that completely, made me burn half of my library basically because I felt like I needed to study everything from astral projections to dream interpretation and the occult even. And then I came across his work and in his opening line in his book, Power versus Force, he says, straight and narrow is the path, waste no time.
Yeah.
And wow, Wow. That completely blew my mind.
Straight and narrow is the path, waste no time. I agree with that. I think especially nowadays this is very important because we live in this age of information. We have access to a lot of stuff, like all kinds of teachings, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
From psychology, spirituality, the New Age, religion. But what I really valued about David Hawkins' work, he has also an integral approach, right? In his own way, has a great way of explaining certain levels, states of consciousness. He had his own self-realization experience too. Let's just, I think we can acknowledge that it was not just intellectual studying, right? His own experience. And, with his calibration methods and the map of consciousness, which, as our listeners know, we have covered already in past podcasts, but he really gave a method of how to calibrate integrity and truth within a teaching.
Yeah.
Right? And ironically, he was based in Sedona, and he even back then was already calling out all the crazy New Age stuff that is definitely around here that has become even more multiplied over the years all over the world, right? And people get sucked into it because there's just a deeper discernment lacking, so to speak. But let's talk a little bit about this map of consciousness, right? And how did he develop the map of consciousness, and what is it all about?
Right. Well, the unique thing about David Hawkins was that he was a psychoanalyst and psychiatrist. So he studied the nature of the human mind and the human condition his whole life. He was also really plagued by his own inner suffering, from atheism to alcoholism to spiritual disillusionment. Like, he had his own journey before he transcended into a higher state of consciousness. So, and as a psychiatrist, he was uniquely qualified to express the mystical experience through the lens of psychoanalysis. So he had a very Western language, whereas the Eastern traditions usually use a different approach expressing that nature of reality. He was able to synthesize it with what he learned from Freud, basically, and his own analysis that he went through.
Yeah.
And what he discovered was through John Diamond, who was an applied clinical kinesiology researcher, that certain things can make you go weak and certain things can make you go strong. And it can start as simple as artificial sweeteners or an apple with sprayed with pesticides. When you hold that to a body, it can make the body respond in a weak way, as expressed through the muscle test. And when that was demonstrated to Dr. Hawkins in his courses that he attended with Dr. Diamond, he saw beyond that. He didn't just see that as a local response, that the body responds to an apple, for example, sprayed with pesticides. He also saw that the person was actually connected to a field of consciousness that is non-local, and that when you test, for example, fear, an emotion that a person can have, it can make you go weak, right? Because it's an emergency reaction, right? It's a fight and flight response, makes the body go weak. And Dr. Hawkins saw beyond that. He thought, like, wow, this is like a telescope that we can use to ascertain what's really going on in the collective consciousness of humanity. So he really combined it with the non-locality, not just with locality. So, and then he started testing, from emotions to pretty much everything you can imagine, right? So, and he developed a map of consciousness arbitrarily by saying, okay, what's the lowest thing on the scale? And what's the highest thing on the scale? If the lowest thing on the scale is 0 and the highest thing on the scale is 1,000, what does the range look like in the middle? And that's pretty much the research he did up until 1995, when he came out with the book Power versus Force, where he really detailed the map of consciousness and all the research that he's done up to that point. Yeah.
So the map of consciousness, for people who are familiar with it, I will also have it in the show notes as well. But it's really fascinating. It's a logarithmic scale, right? So it starts on below 0. You could say it's death, basically.
Yeah, it's apathy. It's like it's a really deep sense of not having energy.
Yeah, energy, right? So it's below. It starts on, he names the lower levels starting at 20, 30, 50, up to 75. Shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, desire, anger, pride. All of these goes up to 200, and then there's a big jump or a big threshold at 200. We'll talk about this. It goes up into courage, neutrality, willingness, acceptance, reasons, and love. 500, joy, peace, enlightenment. at the 700 to 1,000 range. So logarithmic, can you explain this? So does it mean like it's, the lower states are easier to transcend, but the higher we go, the harder it is to reach these higher states? Is that the correct assessment? Or
Yeah, well, logarithmic means it's an exponential growth and not linear growth, basically.
Yeah.
So it's not just a linear like 20, 40, 60. It doesn't just add up mathematically like that. The higher you go, the exponentiality of the energy behind it grows.
Yeah.
So it gets more powerful the higher you go up.
And then, according to the map of consciousness, he has also used that then to calibrate teachings.
Yeah.
Certain teachings, right? Even
right.
teachers, right? And what are fast. That's more, there's another, Truth versus Lies, I think, is one of his books.
Truth versus falsehood, yeah.
Sorry, Truth versus Falsehood, where he have, let's keep in mind, this is really research over decades he has put into it, right? With the calibration. And really fascinating because it seems to me also make difference between like, hey, certain teachers had a certain level of consciousness at one point, but they can easily fall, right?
Yeah.
And the teaching still is in a high level, but the guru or teacher has fallen from grace.
Yeah, indeed.
Right? Can you give some
I think the most
or?
important thing is that from 0 to 200 is pretty much the underbelly of consciousness. So this is where you would say what Jung would denote as the shadow. Right? This is sort of like the darker side or the animalistic or the primal side of the human nature. In Freudian psychology, you would contextualize it as the id. So meaning like everything that's kind of underneath, kind of animalistic drives. And at 200 is this demarcation, this threshold. When you cross that, you cross over into a state of consciousness that is characterized by courage and really a sense of integrity. Like where you say like, okay, I am here and I'm present and I'm strong. Whereas everything below makes you kind of go weak. From 200 going upward, it's like there's a different energy behind it that drives you upward to a higher state of consciousness. Yeah. Whereas below, you're almost like in a hive mind. You're almost in a state of a collective, unindividuated state.
That's a good point. So let's tie this a bit into Jung's work. So below 200, maybe people are just unconsciously driven by their shadow, by collective archetypes, collective shadow, mass movements. We know Carl Jung was very critical of mass movements, egregores, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And interestingly, and it makes a lot of sense because I really like the map of consciousness as a reference. It can be easily misapplied, misused. We'll talk about this shortly. But according to David Hawkins, at the time of his death, he thought, correct me if I'm wrong, that around 75% of all of humanity is below 200.
85,
Or 85% even, right? And only 15% above 200, which will explain a lot, right? Because what he also says, as long as you're below 200, you're out of integrity. You cannot not even perceive truth accurately.
Yeah, you as an individual don't actually realize that you exist. You actually are so entrenched in a collective hive mind consciousness that you almost have no ability to take personal responsibility.
So that's hence what I call the victim blame trap. Definitely is entrenched. People also blame always others. Blame the other side. Blame the left. Blame the right. Blame the deep state. Blame the elite. Blame whatever. Blame my husband, wife, friends, anyone. Right?
Basically, you could say a human being who calibrates below 200 is playing out the Karpman triangle between rescuer, victim, and perpetrator.
Right. Okay.
Whereas when you are at 200, you have more consciousness to process that this is an underlying mechanism, that's an archetypal mechanism of the ego that's playing out. When you cross 200, you have more of a capacity to process that consciously.
Yeah.
Whereas say, I am here and I am experiencing the ego.
It's very interesting because, I mean, there's so much, we can have a whole episode just on the map of consciousness. But a couple of things, what I really find fascinating, I want to address on that as well, because I know you're also deeply spiritual, also very drawn to the true Christian teachings and many other, like, when I say true Christian teachings, similar to myself, esoteric Christianity, not what is nowadays very, I would call almost dogmatic, fundamentalist, distorted type of Christianity, right? And especially nowadays, this revival almost of it becomes almost a trend. Oh, I'm accepting Jesus as my savior and whatnot. Like we call it people that go of the New Age and then take the Christian pill, but in a very dogmatic, fundamentalist way, and everything else is demonic all of a sudden, right?
Yeah,
we know about this,
right?
But here's on this map of consciousness, based on the level of consciousness, there's also a whole row of the view of God. And it's really fascinating because it shows you a lot that a lot of quote unquote, I'm sorry, not to say Christians, but many religious fundamentalist types are literally stuck below 200.
Yeah.
They externalize God almost like a person, right? When you're in lower states, God is seen as despising, vindictive, condemning, punitive, denying, vengeful, all of this, right?
Yeah.
Literally projecting these human qualities that God either punishes or rewards.
Yeah.
So that's really fascinating. The map of consciousness is so profound because it really proves in the sense that we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are.
Yeah.
Including God. True. Right? And then on higher levels, through our inner experience, you see God more as inspiring, merciful, wise, loving, all being as the self in all.
Yeah.
So the view becomes more nuanced and less black and white.
Yeah, exactly. When you're below 200, you have basically an anthropomorphic projection onto God. So all the disavowed human qualities of the shadow get projected onto a transcendent entity. Yeah. Right? And you can see that, for example, in the Old Testament, that God is seen as a punisher, and God is somebody who's up in the sky throwing thunder down and cursing folks to, just to move out and to, people
Didn't he calibrate the Old Testament below 200?
A lot of the pieces in the Old Testament are not nearly as high as the New Testament. Yeah. Unfortunately, both books got clustered together, and then that gives you a fruitful, fertile ground for distortion for Christianity, right? Because you have this archaic perception of God, and then you have this more benevolent, loving version of God in the New Testament, kind of mixed together.
A schizophrenic God.
Yeah, exactly, like a vindictive God that punishes you, right? Yeah. And it's a creation of the ego, and it doesn't come from love or spirit or God.
Yeah. So, in context of the map of consciousness, and also your work and your inner experience, or what Hawkins teaches, how do people want to know, how can I reach higher levels of consciousness, right? Because, there's this, maybe we can tie this into how easily abused, misunderstood the map of consciousness has been, because it can easily be used for spiritual pride. Oh, I'm a higher level, you on a lower level, screw you, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
The ego easily hijacking that, as always.
Yeah.
Or maybe oversimplified, that we almost repress the lower states, right? And I think Hawkins also made clear that we cannot reach the higher states until we have fully integrated or worked through the lower states as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, it's one thing to be a decent human being who can be kind and loving towards others, versus just a very imperfect being that's trying to transcend and become an enlightened being, and then amplifying the shadow that way and acting out the shadow sideways. Right, so there's value in just learning the nuts and bolts of what it means to be a human being. And he said the most transformational thing you can do is just to be a kind and generous human being, basically towards everything, including yourself, which makes it really simple.
Which is easier said than done, though.
Yes.
Right, because we can also fake that and not be sincere about it, authentic towards others. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, when you really look at yourself, right, and how you treat, for example, your dog or your cat.
Yeah.
So can you be as loving to yourself as you can be to your dog or your cat? It can be as simple as that, right? You don't need an abstract spiritual teaching in order to practice that.
Yeah. So with that, what is your experience of having worked personally with David Hawkins? Let's give us some insights. We have studied many years, probably attend his talks here. How is he in person? How is your impression? How has teachings has benefited? And maybe also some valid quote-unquote critique, limitations, maybe distortions, maybe some guru image projected on him, on people that were around him. Yeah. Give us some insights into all of that.
Well, when I was 24, I was basically very immature. I just graduated from college and had a deep thirst within my soul to be surrounded with a male role model, because when I grew up in Austria, I was rarely surrounded with healthy masculinity and a role model that was inspiring to me. So when I found out that David Hawkins lived in Sedona and he was still alive. And I was hugely inspired by his books. You know, there was no other way than for me to book a flight ticket to Sedona and to be in his presence physically, which I did in 2005. I attended some of his lectures, and I was completely blown away. It felt like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to study with one of the greatest people on the planet. So it was a very bold move on my part, because I have one foot in the Austrian life, and as Austrians, we like security and predictability and tradition, and you probably know what that feels like. Yes. A little bit, because we have a similar ancestry. Literally, our parents live only 1 hour apart from one another. But for me to come to the United States was the most important decision that I've ever made in my whole life. And I had a little bit a different idea what it would be like before I came here, what it would be like to actually be with him. Because as soon as I came here, my life turned 180, as it were. So I came here to reach enlightenment and bliss and transcendence and eternal joy. And when I really started fully committing myself to the path and being with him and practicing what he taught, then my own shadow surfaced so much that I cannot say I was thrown into the dark night of the soul very deeply. And I felt a deep sense of abandonment and a deep sense of loss. And then I was faced with the dilemma: how do I reconcile this deep sense of separation that I have with this deep state of union that I experienced throughout my life, right? The oneness experience of being one with God, yet at the same time I experienced myself as a limited, separate, suffering human experiencer. So basically, for the first 5 times I went up on stage to ask him questions, it was always about that. I said, like, David Hawkins, like, I came here to study with you, and I thought I'm going to be in this, you know, unconditionally loving place, and all I experience is this sense of discomfort within myself. And he said, well, did you study the teachings of Buddha, Krishna, and Christ? And I said, yes, I did. He's like, you know, the Buddha was attacked by demons and Christ sweat blood in the Garden of Gethsemane. So what are you complaining about?
He was pretty dry too in his.
Well, at that time I was offended by his answer, because I said, where is the compassion? Like, you know, like, how come you don't empathize with my pain and my suffering, right? And why are you giving me the hard sand whack right now? That's the last thing I need. I need some genuine support and sympathy. So yeah. And the other difficult thing was at the time is that the community that was built around that time with the Hawkins study groups and all the people who flocked to Sedona to study with him from all over the world, like people who are literally moving here to be with him. So I was just one of many, right? When I attended these groups, they seemed to be very mental and cerebral. So just a funny anecdote, one study group just started studying his books, starting with the calibration level at 540, Unconditional Love, and neglecting reading all about the lower states of consciousness. So, so there was a spiritual bypass practice right from the beginning. So, and me being in this state of disillusionment, as it were, felt really ungrounded, dissociated, and dislocated being in these groups, because it didn't really help me find the medicine that I was wanting and longing for, like a community that was embracing all of it, all of the human experience. So at the time, what I did is like I thought I need to look for a different community. So I don't feel like these people are speaking my language, even though they're studying my teacher. So what I did is I put myself into the rooms of the 12-step meetings. I went into 12-step meetings because all people in there was basically talk about pain and suffering and how difficult it is to be alive.
The AA meetings, David Hawkins also calibrated pretty high. He references that a lot, I remember, right?
Yeah, he calibrated them between 540 and 570, which is something...
Unconditional love.
It's unconditional love, basically, and only 0.4% of the population actually reached that state.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So, because I can see this as well as a fellow Germanian. literally we live 1 hour away, our hometowns
Yeah.
back in the old country. But because I can relate to that, it's easy. I love David Hawkins' work, but it's easy to intellectually bypass and spiritually bypass.
Yeah.
Right. And it's really profound because he has a very good gift to put these different states of consciousness into words. But you just hinted at it. That's the trap of spiritual intellectually bypassing, just wanting, even similar to like you did. Oh, I just want to experience the higher states, which is like natural, similar. I can relate to that. I think you don't want to make something wrong because a natural impulse of like, I want to be there. I want to reach that, that soul, almost the cry of the soul to experience this true state of joy, of Satchitananda, that higher states. Absolutely. Yeah. If it would be that easy, we would be already all enlightened, right?
Yes.
But then, that reminds me also what Sri Aurobindo called almost the divine law of ascent and descent, that you can only truly rise high as low as you're willing, able to go into the shadow and the depth of your being, right? Which goes, Carl Jung famously said, paraphrasing, the tree that reaches to heaven must have its roots in hell.
That's exactly
right. Or
right.
Sri Aurobindo, no one can reach heaven who has not gone through hell, metaphorically speaking.
Yes.
So that's what you experienced.
Basically.
In the sense that is the inspiration, right? The path, and then the disillusionment,
exactly.
the dragging down.
Exactly.
Which actually worked in your favor, but because many people can avoid this disillusionment if it gets stuck in the intellect.
Yeah.
Right? And then get stuck to the teaching and very dogmatic. And then you see it not only with Hawkins, many other people I see that get very easily over-fixated on one specific teaching way lens, and then the ego completely hijacks it intellectually.
Right.
And they lie to themselves that they're advancing, but they're just, in a loop, so to speak. Does it?
Yeah, exactly. They experience enlightenment through the mind. So they're basically intellectualizing. They have an idea of what it's like. And just because you have sometimes transient experiences of an elated state of consciousness doesn't mean you actually calibrate there. Yeah. And I think that's also a really important distinction, because I can have a moment of anger or fear. That doesn't mean I calibrated that level.
Right. So
the state is not the stage.
To understand. Yeah. So you can still calibrate at certain levels, higher above 200.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I experience still states of shame, anger, grief, whatever may come up.
Yeah.
But you don't get stuck there, basically. Right?
No, it's not the place where you hang out most of the time.
Yeah. Now, what's really fascinating, and that might be really, and I'm going to say maybe offensive to the ego, so to speak, but correct me if I'm wrong, David Hawkins claimed that everybody's born with a specific level of consciousness already at birth.
Yeah.
A set one.
That's true.
Right? And then within one lifetime, you don't gravitate that much from that level of consciousness that much, unless, let's say, you start to begin to engage in this psychospiritual work more consciously. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're not born as a tabula rasa, basically as a formless being. Like, you already come with dispositions and with karmic tendencies into this three-dimensional reality.
Right.
For example, with David Hawkins, he came into this planet with already a pretty high calibrated state of consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, similar to, the people like you as well, if anybody who get early on into this material, something triggers from a past life, like a karmic trajectory, I would argue, right?
Absolutely.
Because it feels more familiar, and then you start to wake up, it's more like a remembering.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, for me, it was like, since I was a child, I always felt really homesick because I still remembered the divine state. Yeah. So when I experienced this separate existence here, I've always felt a deep sense of longing for something higher, and that really never went away. And that's what really motivated me to go really deep into psychology and spirituality. Yeah.
So let's talk about this shortly, how more in practical way, besides David Hawkins and more psychospiritual inner work, shadow work, your work. But I want to go back to David Hawkins real quick, because his teachings is basically a non-dual teaching. That's what he teaches too. Is that correct? Right? And it's very profound, because that's a lot of spiritual teachings rise beyond good and evil, non-duality, right? We all know that. And even he has also the idea that we are stuck in this, what I've heard him many times say and written this book, we're stuck in this Newtonian paradigm of cause and effect.
Yeah.
right? That's the state of consciousness below 400, reason, intellect. And that's also another big threshold to cross, the mind, right? Around 400 into 500, which is true unconditional love, the non-dual state.
Right.
But as an experience, not as a philosophical concept,
Right.
Which can be easily abused. But that's also fascinating because I feel once you enter these higher states, your sense of reality becomes more nuanced. It's not that black and white, this is good, this is bad. It's more a sense of an aspect of all the one, right?
Yeah.
Because I want to talk about this a little bit, about good and evil, especially nowadays, if we had recently Epstein files released, a lot of evils coming up, people struggling with the context of evil. You have the Christians come up and want to, dogmatic Christians, and Satan needs to be defeated, demonic, we want to kill them all, right? Arrest them all. It's understandable, but that's coming still from this lower state of consciousness based on separation, right? So how do you know how Hawkins would approach this whole topic of good and evil in the context of his work and the map of consciousness?
Well, Dr. Hawkins was a mystic, and he was very much in a transcendent state of consciousness. And he said, the more you commit yourself to the truth and the light, the more adversity you're going to pull up from the unconscious. So the more set you are in your intention to become unconditionally loving, the more you will bring up the adversary of love.
Okay.
So in order to really land at a higher state of consciousness, you need to walk through all the oppositions and all the attacks and all the all the things that will be flying your way that you need to look at and transcend. If you want to land at a high state of consciousness, you always have to face polarity and the dichotomy of the opposites.
Right.
And you have to basically walk through them and integrate them to land at a higher state of consciousness. Yeah. So the human ego exists from 0 to very high up to 950, basically. So
he even said the ego still in higher states can all of a sudden come back.
It does. There's a personal aspect of the ego and there's an impersonal aspect of the ego. The impersonal aspect of the ego continues up until very, very high, which a lot of people don't know. And I think that's why I'm so grateful for his teachings, is because he didn't just say, hey, once you're enlightened, like it's over and you're done, basically, right? He said, like, no, enlightenment is also something that can be diversified. Like enlightenment exists from a state of 600 to 1,000.
Different.
And when you are in a state of 600 to 1,000, even then you will still have attacks. Even Jesus went into the desert and was tempted by Lucifer, you know, and he was already at a very high state of consciousness.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Buddha himself, right at enlightenment, demonic forces tempted him, interfered with him.
Mara played all the games on him that the human mind can play.
Yeah. Sri Aurobindo had his own battles with the hostile forces. I've talked about this. Yogananda as well had encounters with these astral forces. And even, let's talk about this a little bit. I was really, I wouldn't say surprised, but really, acknowledged or respected that David Hawkins talked about his own struggle when he had experienced higher levels of consciousness, and literally talked about how he was getting tempted by Lucifer, the Luciferic temptation. Yeah. Right? Which is, I think, what you talk about. A lot of people on higher states of consciousness, gurus, spiritual teachers, fall from grace because of that temptation. Can you speak a little about, did he mention that ever in the talks when you were present with him?
All the time, basically.
Oh, really?
Because his responsibility as a spiritual teacher was to fill in the gaps of all the spiritual teachers before him, where they left things maybe a little bit ambiguous or incomplete. Yeah. So he even said, like, well, I'm here to correct some of the mistakes that are in Buddha's teachings and some of the mistakes that are in the teachings of Christianity. Not necessarily maybe that the teachers themselves made those mistakes, but the interpretations that humans made afterwards brought the teachings down. Basically, if you calibrate the teachings as their original back then, calibrate very high, right? Buddhism, Hinduism, and Christianity have very high teachings, but over the centuries, they have been brought down to very low levels.
It's very fascinating, because I kind of felt this, because recently I'm sure you're aware, we had a podcast on Kali Yuga, the end of the Kali Yuga, Misra's book, with this dark age. And he in his book made a really profound statement that all the religious, spiritual teachings have also been corrupted and downgraded over centuries, even thousands of years.
Exactly.
Sri Aurobindo talked about the same. He rediscovered the secret of the Vedas from 5,000 years ago. East and West has been corrupted, not necessarily out of evil intentions, but because of this level of consciousness trying to interpret something.
Absolutely.
Right?
The human mind is a very tricky minefield.
Yeah.
It can interpret everything in so many ways.
So the way Hawkins bypasses with the muscle testing, because the muscle testing bypasses the intellectual mind. It gives you just straight connection to truth with capital T.
Yeah, well, Dr. Hawkins was already in the advanced state of consciousness before he even discovered the muscle test. So the muscle test wasn't necessarily the tool that helped him advance to the high levels. The muscle testing was a tool that he used as a practical tool to actually verify what he has experienced and to make it more accessible to his students.
So that's important to know, because I want to address this real quick, because a lot of people don't know, but he mentions sometimes in his books that, not everybody can accurately muscle test.
That's right.
There need to be certain conditions. What are the conditions?
Well, basically, you need to be a human being that calibrates above 200, because that is really that place within your own individual evolution where you can say that I exist and I have integrity and have accountability. And without honesty, you cannot reliably get feedback from the universe, because the mind will always be in a state of reversal, meaning it interprets reality in a 180 way. So you almost have a 180 interpretation of what it's actually like.
Right.
So essence versus appearance, right? So you actually never have a reliable tool of assessing reality accurately. You will always have a very 180 view on how it actually is based on the level of consciousness that you actually calibrate at. So if you're in a state of fear, you will see the world through a very fearful lens.
Right.
If you're at a state of pride, you will run around feeling superior, and you will project that superiority on the people around you, right? You're just like, why does everybody so treat me like I'm nothing, right?
Right.
So if you really want to have a reliable muscle test, you have to be in a state of coherence. Means like your energy system cannot be reversed. So next thing is, even if you're at a state of 200 or above, you can still be in a state of reversal, because any sign of stress or any sign of illness can actually reverse your energetic system. So let's say you are temporarily attacked by an evil force, for example, right? You can one of your chakras can be in a state of reversal and therefore give you a unreliable muscle test. And a lot of people don't know. And I think if I were to teach this all over again, I think I would highlight that probably even more to the students, because David Hawkins made it often sound like it's really easy to muscle test and to cross-verify calibrations with different research teams, whereas in my experience, the numbers are often all over the place, and the reliability is not actually as clear as he said it is.
Okay, let's talk about this. So the map of consciousness, his work definitely stands on its own. It's very profound, true, like it helps, right? But it's not bulletproof.
No.
Let's say it like that, right? So even in this book, Truth versus Falsehood, you could argue some of the calibrations are off. Maybe could even his own unconscious bias come in?
Yeah.
Who knows, right?
Yeah, I think it always depends how you hold something in mind, right? Context defines everything. Basically, you're trying to define a content. Let's say, where does Epstein calibrate, or where does AA calibrate, or where, but basically how you hold something does make a difference. For example, if you calibrate astrology, what kind of astrology are you calibrating, right? Are you calibrating Vedic astrology? Are you calibrating the work, how Laura does it, or how Mark Jones does it, or
individually?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So there's a lot of spread there and a lot of variability there that a muscle test really can't take into account. Like there's an averaged up number. Okay, this is astrology and it calibrates at 220 or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be really careful to not use that as an aggressive tool to be better than or to judge, because that's so easily done by the mind, right? So you can weaponize the map of consciousness and the muscle testing, again, for egoic purposes, basically. And that's what I've seen in the spiritual community, and especially in the Dr. Hawkins community a lot, where some people use the muscle test to verify their own level of consciousness, and somebody comes and says, hey, my cat calibrates at 850, then they're probably gone a little delusional.
He loved that. He calibrates it. He said, though, it's beautiful, the wagging tail of a dog calibrates at 500, and the purring of a cat, like at love. This is high. This is a higher state of love most humans can embody.
Yeah, and a songbird song. So these three things, are actually divine qualities that penetrate the human experience are a gift to humanity.
Yeah, beautiful. Let's just be clear, like when we talk about love from the Hawkins scale map of consciousness above 100, 500, and unconditional love 540, very, very few humans are able to reach that state. He said like 0.2% or something. I don't even...
4% of the population calibrate above the level of 500, which is a state of love. And 0.4% of the population calibrate above the level of 540. So this is
true unconditional love.
Which is very rare. Yeah. And just 1 in 10 million people are able to calibrate above 600.
Wow. So be clear, because people talk about love. Most of what people see as love and experience as love is what Sri Aurobindo called like just their vital desires, right? It's conditional love, right? It's sexual, it's physical, it's attraction. It's if you behave a certain way, then I love you, and then I love you back, like, that kind of stuff.
Transactional, yeah.
Transactional, which most of us, experience on some level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, Whereas 540 is a place where you really have removed the hooks from expecting things to come back in return, right? You just, at that point, you're solid in your love. You radiate a frequency that just permeates without necessarily any conditions attached.
Yeah, even simple. Like if you tell somebody, your loved one or your friend, I love you.
Yeah.
And you have an ounce, tiny bit of an expectation of something to get back from that.
Yeah.
That's not true love right there.
No. And that's what would be called agape versus eros or philios, right? Like those distinctions from the Greek philosophy, right? Agape would be unconditional love. Right. Whereas eros has a lot more to do with passionate attraction and with conditional love. And most people get hooked on love via romance, right? And it's like because they feel good transitorily for a little while until the fuel burns up and the lower consciousness levels resurface, and then they have to be brought back into unison with a higher field of love again, right? So it's an ever-evolving upward spiral into greater degrees of consciousness. Yeah.
No, exactly. And that's, I feel then, well, that's a great segue. I want to talk more about now, especially in the second hour. Let's tie this into your work, what you specifically do on yourself and with others, Jungian psychology, because that really, I think, is a great bridge or great combination of like the spiritual work, David Hawkins understanding, but, shadow work really much helps to integrate these lower states, so to speak, without rejecting them, right? Or even with, relationship, animus projections, integration, right? That stuff. The shadow usually comes of what we call romantic love. It's like you're, what's it called? Lost in the mystica, what do you call that? Projection phase, right? When you don't really see the person as who she really is, but you have just this overlay. Infatuation, right? And then after a few months, a year, or a couple of years, all of a sudden the shadow comes up. Yeah. Which then actually from Jungian perspective argue then the true marriage happens. Right, when you slay the dragon, we have it all, the King Arthur philosophy, mythologies, and all of that talk about that. So let's definitely dive deeper into that. In the second hour, I want to also talk more about the Luciferic temptation, specifically how you have dealt with that, because a lot of misunderstandings. People call the elite Luciferians and throw around the word Lucifer like they just picked it up without really understanding. Even Christians, I find, and I think we want to bring some clarity to that. Right. Especially David Hawkins talked about this as well. I want to talk about your specific approach to psychospiritual work, because that's always, the question, like we saw in Hawkins' work, we can easily get lost in the mental realm, non-duality, and lose our humanity in it all, right? So to speak, right? Yeah. What does it mean to be human nowadays in this day and age, especially with the technology and all this coming up? And then the bigger picture, right? And where you see everything evolving, the role of AI, pros and cons, all of that, how that ties into, the evolution of consciousness, really, because that's what Hawkins was really about as well, right? The evolution of consciousness. And if just for the first hour, if anybody wants to learn more about you, is there any way to contact you, to get a hold of you or learn about you? Do you have a website or anything?
Yeah, best way to contact me is go to my website, danielharner.com. That's where you find my email and a phone number. And if you feel called to reach out, please do so.
Excellent. Beautiful. I'll link that in the show notes. And as always, the second hour is available for all members. If you're not a member yet, feel free to sign up and support our work. You can sign up at veilofreality.com/membership, and we'll give you access to the second hour of over 170 episodes now. And with that being said, thank you for listening, and we'll be right back.